One Step Ahead by Lundquist and Beslick.
Welcome to One Step Ahead radio podcast. Every week, interesting people, interesting topics around the world. And this week we have a pleasure, James and I, to welcome Alison Proctor, one of the people that is not only engaging, but also trying to do that throughout the business that Alison is running. So, Alison, welcome to One Step Ahead radio. And James, welcome to you too.
Hi, thank you very much for having me here.
Hello to everybody. Good to be back again. Another interesting discussion. It's going to be very interesting.
Alison, thanks for making time for this. We had some sort of a pre-discussion, pre-conversation about the state of the world. It's quite a big topic. But if we start with, yourself, if you give us a bit of a background, what you're doing and where you come from, and also then we can take it on with some of the things happening in the UK and also what you see happening in a business that you're running.
So primarily, I fund developers and we work within the built environment. So what we have traditionally done is loaned our own money to developers that want to build. And for that extent, I've been in this industry, in the speculative market across the globe. So as far as, say, Dubai and Turkey and the Costa del Sol. And I've been part of the, if you like, the funding of the destruction and the degradation of the natural environment. And that was the point where I needed to pivot and say, we can no longer sustain these practices. So I now work within a traditional broker finance house, but I am specifically finding the developers that either are already working to green standards, that already work to sustainable practice. And I'm also translating all of the academic research and all of the financial papers that come out to try and educate them and move the brown developers away from destructive practice into sustainable build. So that's my background.
It's fascinating, especially because you're sort of pointing out some of the challenging things, how to shift industry. The construction industry is, as we know, one of the big CO2 emitters in the world. And it's something, as we all know, we need houses, we need places to go to work. This is the business that will go on for, centuries from now. But why is sustainability so important for you? What is the drive that you have behind that? Partly, I guess, it's because you've seen the destruction part, as you said. But also, I guess, there is something else. Yeah.
Well, yes, having seen it firsthand. So literally being on a site where you're looking at the viability of a project and you're actually seeing animals, from foxes in Europe, snakes, rabbits, you're actually seeing the nature on the ground, and then you see it absolutely decimated and you wonder where it goes. And then you look at the research and you see that we are losing species at a rate of knots. So it's a real personal drive that I come into this almost from an ecology angle and an environmental angle. And prior to the financial side of the business, I was always involved in trying to sort of be an activist for nature. But absolutely nothing happens without the money. Without the money, we don't create anything. So for me, it's really important about where the money goes, who receives those funds, and what are they going to do with it. So in real simple terms, it's about translating our existing financial frameworks and replacing them with something that takes into account the financial accountability for human beings and for nature. And this all stems from the fact that I have been seeing over a period of years that the system changed to one that's really dominated by extreme wealth, which we know comes extreme power.
James, what do you think about this? This is a very interesting topic that Alison is bringing up, because it also points at the direction we've been discussing before, moving financial capital into something that it can address the challenges we have, still making money, but doing it in a different way. What's your take on it?
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating angle of something that everybody within the sustainability world is kind of living through and dealing with, and you're sort of on the cutting edge of it in a very specific, but obviously very impactful industry, and I picking up on what you're hearing about, changing people's behaviors, but also it's not just nice frilly, I'm going to believe in it today. It's actually making financial and money decisions about it, and getting people to change their investment decisions and their lending decisions. So I was interested, you saying about having to sort of convince people. How do you change their minds? How do you get them to see a different perspective, or actually make different decisions on that, and rather than go down business as usual, go down a sustainable path? What are the arguments that you bring to them? Because obviously we've been talking about this, like the whole global narrative that we're going to have to move to transition to a sustainable economy is really being challenged at the moment, and is kind of being rolled back, but even by regulation, by laws and everything. So it's becoming harder to convince. So what's your pitch to people when you say this is how you need to do things?
Yeah. Okay. So again, it's something else I've thought about and think about constantly is the language that we're using within the corporate space, and how does that translate to the language that everyday people, I'm this ordinary person that has to live and go to work and provide, etc. How do I reconcile what I do with what's impacting on the planet? And I think most people actually do the same. They think about it internally, but they don't know how to translate it. So it's then left for compliance and direction to sort of lead people. So if that's pushed back, which we're seeing right now, then people almost go underground with it. It doesn't mean it's going away. That's the point that's really important to me is the environmental, social, and governance standards, which to me is the moral compass of how we operate. If that can't change, nature is nature. The truth and honesty will always come out. And if something's corrupted, if something is like impacted by, let's just call it corporate bullying, for example, we're seeing examples of corporate bullying all the time right now. So we've got to be really strong and come together. So when I first spoke about why should you build sustainably, I did need to find my allies. I did need to find people who were already leading the way, and that came through an organization called ACAN, that's Architects Climate Action Network. And they stand as an international group now, and it's grown over the last 5 years, and it's all individuals, some from major practices, some from multinational, interdisciplinary agencies that really hold power. But these are people within the collectively as individuals can have some influence, and that's where I really started with this. Who has influence? Who can make a difference when it comes to building sustainably? So then I hear the word sustainable all the time, and I think this is getting watered down now. This language needs to be specific, where there are test cases and examples of what sustainable is when it's successful, and when it's successful, it attracts the money. So without the risk being deployed in terms of we're not going to invest in that because we don't know how this will play out on our profit line. So if it's something that people want, it attracts a premium, and we've seen that in London. And I'm from Manchester. I look at the whole world globally as this small village. We're all interconnected. Everything connects. But if I just say, looking at examples in London, we've seen people want housing that is safer, more energy efficient. We've seen offices command higher premiums when they have sustainable credentials. So we can.
So there is a
examples.
so there is the money. Listen, there is a money in this. Obviously,
Yeah.
The question I have is that, I mean, given that if you look at the development sort of a segment of the construction part of the world, I mean, there is a lot of discussion about the climate risk, physical risk. I mean, the droughts, the storms, the fires, and all of that. I mean, when you bring these, if I understand correctly, what one of your tasks, what you're trying to achieve is to make developers green.
Yes.
Green, basically, all of that. What is their response to you in terms of, are they doing it for the, let alone moral reasons, right thing to do? But, from a financial point of view, it should be very smart.
Financially, it should be really smart, but the truth is it's difficult because everything is at a premium. So as I used to say to the developers, because the way that I would relate to it is originally when you saw those very first flat screen televisions, those huge, but brand new, great TVs that people put on the walls, took up very little space. They cost a fortune. And the early adopters bought into them. And now every single house in practically every room has a smart television on the wall, and they are affordable and people love them. And it's the same principle with the affordable housing. My big issue, just to sort of on a tangent, is we already have so much existing property that we can solve problems with. We can alter the mindset of how speculative development works, and it works on demolishing and building new. And we have got to move away from that. Why? Because we don't have the resources. We need to move into a circular economy, and that's again another conversation. But that's where developers understand that if they can show their credibility through circular principles, if they can show where they've regenerated, they actually feel good about it as well. So there's a who's going to lead first, who's going to be the early adopters, those on the green register, those architects and designers and builders that are aligned to ACAN, Architects Climate Action Network. They are the font of knowledge, the hub of where this starts. And again, it's why I'm so passionate about leading the way for that organization and for collaboration with Client Earth, for collaboration with Architects Declare, Business Declare. When we come together as organizations, we create the impact, and that's when the money moves. And that's my theory.
It's a good theory. I like it. James, any comments on this?
Yeah, well, it's funny. It connects to two very interesting discussions I had with clients yesterday. What you're kind of alluding to is kind of the importance at the end for the choice of the customer, the choice of the consumer, the choice of the people who are actually paying for a good or a service or something. With a house, it's going to last you years, decades, or all of your life. It's a huge decision. I moved house last year, so it's very fresh in my mind. But no, I had these two conversations yesterday with companies in completely different sectors, talking about obviously in this difficult time of their sustainability commitment and how they communicate it, how they make it matter. And both times, it comes down to the stakeholder, if we want that phrase, that they're really, really pushing on is the customer, the client. And this idea that kind of big corporations need to have this kind of generic language that we're sustainable because we have to be sustainable. It's kind of mutating now and pivoting into, I'm going to talk to my customer specifically about what they're buying. And the corporate speak is being transformed into product speak. So I'll tell you about exactly what you're buying, or your house, or your retrofit, or it's no longer kind of a generic corporate sort of claim to sort of reducing emissions generically because everyone's agreed with that but it's like, what are you going to do? What are you buying? And in both cases, it was a question of what's going to be the difference in one case, between the sales rep and the customer. In that conversation, what information can the sales rep bring about the specific product or the service that we were talking about that has sustainability benefits to them, and that you can translate that into benefits rather than being, we need to do it because we need to do it. And I see very much that that conversation changing, and the importance of this commercial aspect as being a driver then for the whole organization, because that really gets people to, it gets their attention and it gets people to switch on and changes the conversation very dramatically. I mean, what you're saying about it being more specific, being more focused, rather than the kind of the broad principles. We're all agreed kind of on those principles.
Yeah.
Turning that into action and decisions is a different question. I think that's where we need to be going right now.
So I'm going to agree completely. I'd like to say let's have an argument about this, but the facts really are, given the choice, would you like to have a product that is not detrimental to the planet? Would you like to choose something that has been part of a circular economy, been regenerated, is approved for full reuse, is not going to go into landfill or create greenhouse gases in the future? Most people are now aware of this. And if they're not, they're seeing it played out on their television screens in the form of floods, fires, they're going on all over. So the general public, that's you and I, we are aware now. More people are aware. It's even coming to the screens of mainstream television, which I've been waiting years for, to say somebody's actually talking about climate change now. So I'm not too worried about Trump and how long he's going to be in for, because what we're seeing is a huge spike in that backlash in the politics of it. But what we're not going to alter is the path the planet's on, and that our planet doesn't care about Trump. He's going to make more noise than anybody else. But ultimately, people, us human beings, we make a choice. Do we want to do good or do we want to destroy? That's the no-brainer to me.
It's an interesting thing that you're bringing up about the noise, political noise that has been created. But do you experience this backlash, especially in the UK? Can you see it? Can you feel it as well?
Yeah, right now.
And also, you mentioned something about what's happening politically. There are attempts to sort of pass laws in a silent way, not really getting people involved and so on.
So
tell us a bit about that.
Now you get me on my high horse, because this is active right now. We've just gone through the second reading through Parliament on the planning and infrastructure bill. It's a huge bill that affects everybody. So it's not just the built environment. It's all of the national infrastructure projects that will take place. It's all of the 1.5 million housing aims that the government has promised, which, by the way, they've just revised to 1.3 million houses. So there's a lot going on in government that I'm seeing almost parallels with how the US government are currently working. I don't like it one bit, and neither do a lot of other people. So the rush through on this bill, which has passed for its third reading, now has a committee. So the planning and infrastructure bill is so important for everybody in the UK to see, because we were, as a small nation, leading the way on biodiversity. Net gain. We were showing the legal course. So there is some good news that the biodiversity net gain law will remain in place. However, it's been sort of swept away by this huge pay, and it's a phrase I saw on LinkedIn, pay to trash. So there's a levy being introduced, which will allow the big developments and the big tier 1 companies to pay into a levy, which then will offset all of the damage that they're doing. How will that be offset? How will that be introduced? How will it be monitored? That's all ambiguous. So now there's an army of ecologists and planners and architects all looking at the bill, and that's actually really good timing for this conversation, because we have until the 22nd of May, I think it is, to put our evidence on the table. So the conflict in terms of why am I doing this when I'm funding developers and I want to get these houses built and I want to get, the economy growing again. Why, there's a conflict here for me. Yeah, I do want to see growth in the economy, but not at the expense any more than I have seen of this environment. So we've got to come together. I call them my tribes, my allies, the Trojan horses within finance that also want to do good. So we've got to come together. So this conversation is pivotal to me now to bring everybody in on the planning and infrastructure bill and hold the tier one companies. There's 13 CEOs right now who have signed, not even consulted with their own people, signed a letter open to the government this week, handed it across and said, let's just get on with this bill regardless of what damage it does.
It's very interesting. I mean, James, go back to what we discussed earlier on the, rolling back the rule of law across different regions, changing the regulation and very swiftly to sort of accommodate short-term economic gains. I mean, how do you see that?
Yeah, it's really. I think what's going through my mind as I'm listening to this is the assumptions about what people think or what people expect or what people want. And you said the magic word there, Alice, in terms of without consulting anybody. There's a lot of this kind of being driven by interests and being driven by short-term or commercial business interests, saying we need to do this because it's it's my priority, and disregard the long term. And I think within within broader society, there's so much, and we don't realize how much goodwill and availability of people to actually make these decisions there is. And so I think I absolutely agree with the importance of understanding better and measuring and getting a sense of how much interest and availability there is of people to actually do the things the right way. So we didn't talk about it. I can't remember exactly when this came out, but in an example of this was in Nature Climate Change, published a study of a survey done 130,000 people in 125 countries, asking them if they would be willing to give 1% of their household income to combat climate change. And 69% of the global population, varies very much between countries, 69% of the people said, yes, we are. But then what's interesting is then when they were asked whether they thought other people would be willing to contribute as well, only 43% of people said that they thought others would be willing. So when they're asked about themselves, they say, yes, I would. Do you think other people would? You say, probably not. So there's this kind of mismatch between what I myself am prepared to do, what I think is important, and what I'm going to actually contribute and commit to. But I suspect that nobody else is, everyone else is much more cynical than I am. So there's this gap of information that we sort of assume that, no, everybody be happy just to, to keep on with business as usual. But actually, it's not the case.
Put your money where your mouth is. So it's there are those that talk the talk and those that walk the walk. So we need to create more action. And I think a lot of that comes down to how do people feel about their own agency and their own power? And if I'm going to do this, but if they don't feel supported and in a collective action, then it's very easy to be manipulated and distort, see the truth distorted. So for me, it's all about all those people. So like 70% of the people said, yeah, I'll give 1%. But only if somebody else is giving it, and I'm seeing it.
Who's going to start? Yeah, there's going to be the first one. Yeah,
we're back to the early adopters and the leaders in the sustainable space. So whilst we're early adopters, if you've got big, powerful entities that don't really want this to get off the ground, big example for example, I've known for decades that hemp is a good natural material. It solves a multitude of problems and it's environmentally friendly. It has been denigrated since the 1930s. It's been outlawed. And who did all that? The oil industry. So
that's very interesting. Yes, that's a very interesting topic for discussion as well. Yeah.
Okay. Again, that's another topic. And there are some experts in that field that I would love to introduce you to. So it is, if we're going to create solutions for what's happening right now, we need to come together. That's it. In my opinion, we need to get individuals to feel that they have their own agency, but you get that from that collective power of being aligned to your tribe.
So more cooperation, more interaction, more collective action,
Yeah, I
more education, I think, as well. People need much more education than they have today. I think we have assumed, many of us actually working in this industry, that sort of a sustainability education has sort of penetrated the different layers of educational system, but that's not actually true. I was doing some research yesterday looking at just introductory courses on sustainability for both sort of elementary mid-level schools and even higher education. It's quite rudimentary. It's very sort of it's not coherent, and interestingly, I mean, many people don't even understand the connection between some of these things and the economy, which is also one of the reasons why we have difficulties to explain what the true value is, because they really don't understand the connection of externalities not being priced and so on. But James, I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking about this on this educational side, I mean, the reason why we have one step ahead the podcast is also to educate people, to get them more involved and understand different points. I mean, what's your take on, you have interactions with a lot of companies in Italy and internationally. What's your take on sort of an understanding educational level on people that are actually working with sustainability? Do they understand how important education is?
No, the problem with these things, then it gets turned into silos, and it turns into, the HR budget that needs to allocate to. And we did a piece of work recently about sustainability in the supply chains. And looking at some of the courses, I was talking with my colleague just before we came on air, actually, about some of the courses that are being proposed by some organizations, and it's very, very vertical, and it's very, very technical, and done by technical people who have that very specific knowledge to explain processes or instruments, and they miss the whole thing about the mindset and about the whole why. Like, why are we doing this? And last year we did a lovely piece of training with a company here, and we actually sat down with all their procurement teams, just trying to get away from the acronyms and the term. There's that as well, but like dedicate time and a half day to make them start to think about why they need to change and what it means for them practically. And it was incredible because when we did that, they were super engaged, and they had so much information. Like, the frontline people who deal with interaction understand sustainability often much more than the technical expert, because they live it and they see it and they know the trade-off and they know the difficulty, and they know, and people say, I tried to do that. I tried to get them to change, the layout and the store and what we were trying to do, and I couldn't, because there's this law and because there's this regulation and because of that. And they understand the practical implications of what it is to be sustainable, because there's a lot of people trying to do it. And so the education around it needs to be kind of framed in those terms that enable, as Alison said before, you using the words about agency and empowering people, rather than saying this is a big complicated corporate system at a European level and the CSRD, and they go, okay, right, I'll take notes if you're going to ask me a question afterwards, but I haven't really got why.
So a year or two ago, I was just bogged down in the acronyms, and I was trying to decipher what the difference was between different acronyms, which basically led to compliance and legislation. And we need governance,
Sure,
but we need a framework that we can work to, because children are always pushing the boundaries. Where are the limits? And we need to have that within those corporate companies as well. But that's partly what's bogged everybody down, is the complexity of all of the regulations. So in terms of why is ESG moving back? And I'll remind people, ESG is environmental, social, and governance principles. And the frameworks were put in to deliver those principles, but the frameworks became incredibly complex. So the people on the ground having to do the work, it was just too much. And this is why rollback and pushback has gone back so easily, because it's easy to say, oh, I don't need to do that now. So we are reassessing what it means, how we deliver it successfully. And one of the things that you've just said is the education within a sustainable role. But that goes back to junior school, primary school, and through further education in everything, embedding it in everything. And the other thing, which is quite interesting, which I really took for granted and shocked me, how little financial education is incorporated in academic research through architect schools, through all further education, through universities, except an economy course. If you're an economist, you're dedicated to it. But if you're a designer, an architect, a builder or construction, when do you get taught finances? When does that appear? So what actually part of my day role as well, one of my day jobs, is introduce what does finance mean? How do you access finance? How does it impact your business? Because it's left to somebody else to always do it, a treasury team or the finance director. And the finance director doesn't always get involved in the sustainable side of it. And those have got to meet. So there's our ecosystem again, is education right the way. Change our education system to incorporate the fiduciary duty of planet and people as well as profit, and we might get a little bit more balance, because that's out of kilter entirely, and we know that.
Thank you very much, Alison. This has been a very good and interesting conversation. We could go on for a very long time, but of course we have a limited time sometimes, and this is the session with a very interesting person that works in the middle of developing sort of a business, I guess, across the world, and sort of tackling, I would say, rather, sustainability issues on a daily basis. James, I think it was a pleasure from both of us to host Alison. Alison, many thanks. Good luck with you, whatever you do. And keep doing the good work. And I agree with you. Let's stay positive and let's collaborate and work collectively.
Brilliant.
That will be all for this session. Many thanks for listeners.
Thank you.
Many thanks for listening to One Step Ahead Radio, and tune in for new guests and interesting topics that we are going to address going forward. James and Alison, many thanks for today.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks to you.